I have Don Brown with me. He's an attorney. He's an author. He's a speaker. He's running for U.S. Senate. And I'm just telling you, if I were in North Carolina, I'd be voting for this dude right here. Really. You know why? Because you're a patriot and you don't find those very often. And back in the olden days when COVID hit, you were out there on your little old island somewhere saying, don't take the jab, don't take the jab. And now people, they know the truth.
Well, Donna, and you were there. Yeah, and you were there with me, Donna. There were just a very few of us patriots who were cautioning people against the mask, which there was no scientific efficacy at all to the mask. All you had to do is read in the medical journals. Yeah. These masks don't stop viral penetration. All it does is cause you to suffocate and breathe your own germs back in. And the jab itself, which was always under an emergency use authorization. There was no, I mean, they can say, despite all the big pharma propaganda, it was very dangerous and very reckless to be pushing that thing as fast as it got pushed. And as you know, I was involved in some major litigation, as it turned out, against the jab and Biden's unconstitutional jab mandates. And people have been injured and hurt and killed. And like we were saying off air, just look at Megyn Kelly, for example. She's one prominent American who was buying into take the jab garbage. You see that people like sheeple. Just one person says it, the other person says they follow it. Oh, they said it on CNN. They said it on TV. The head of the RNC in North Carolina said it. Whoever said it must be so. And people just hold their heads because people on TV say it and haven't been thinking critically. And people are dropping dead. People are injured. There's a huge spike in myocarditis. I even saw a report on CBS News confirming the huge spike in myocarditis related apparently to these jabs. And so I'm very, very grateful that you and I were on board together fighting this as a matter of principle and as a principle for preserving freedom. And I hope that the next time the government, aligned with the pharmaceutical complex or whoever else they're aligned to, tries to use widespread fear to manipulate people, that we'll know better.
Well, I think so. But I have to tell you something that really gripes me more than anything. You have an opponent who was for it originally. I've seen it. And now he's acting like he was just against it from day one. Please.
Well, I'm assuming you're talking about Mike Watley, the former RNC chair, who was the chair of the North Carolina Republican Party. And it's true, Michael stood in front of party headquarters and pushed a jab. He said it was not a matter of politics, but a matter of science. Well, let me tell you something, Michael. It was never a matter of science. None of the COVID BS and garbage that they shoved down our throats was a matter of science. It was a matter of totalitarianism and huge, insane profits for these big pharma companies. That's what it was a matter of. And, President Eisenhower, as I've mentioned to you before, who I consider to be the greatest general in American history, aside from George Washington himself, warned over and over again in this closing address to the nation on the day before President Kennedy was sworn in about the military industrial complex. Here you have a great general who's been inside of the military and seen the war production capability, warning over and over again about the military industrial complex. Well, today we have not only that, continuing to push wars in Ukraine, etc., but we've got a thing called the governmental pharmaceutical complex, where these big pharma companies like Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson and, whoever it might be, are given immunity by the federal government, even if their jab kills somebody or paralyzes them, which is not fair, because we have a thing in the 14th Amendment called the Equal Protection Clause, and it's applied to the 5th Amendment. The Equal Protection Clause is, and a Due Process Clause there, which means that we all should be given equal protection laws. We have companies here in North Carolina. Lowe's is a big North Carolina corporation. Nucor Steel is a big North Carolina corporation. We have wonderful small North Carolina corporations. Hardee's started in North Carolina. There's Parker's Barbecue, my favorite barbecue place down in Wilson. I love Bill's when they were in business also. But I'm telling you, none of those North Carolina corporations get protection by the federal government. My law firm doesn't get protection from the federal government. You're in South Carolina, you don't get protection from the federal government. No. Why should these big vax manufacturers have an advantage where they get absolute protection from being sued, which lets them be roughshod with their safety standards and push stuff out? And you can scare the heck out of people. You can make them think they want a jab, and then you can get paid for the jab. And you saw what happened. ivermectin was demonized and lampooned by the federal government and by Big Pharma and by the FDA. Ivermectin was called by the NIH the third wonder drug of the world behind aspirin and penicillin just a few years before COVID. And the countries in Africa that could not afford these expensive, dangerous jabs had the lowest death rate in the world from ivermectin and from hydroxychloroquine. And so, I appreciate you bringing that up, but I don't think, it's like Santayana said, and Churchill repeated this: those who are ignorant of history are doomed to repeat it. We can't forget. We can't let them forget either. And we've got to keep reminding ourselves of what they tried. This is one of the biggest totalitarian takeovers we've seen in this country, in many, many years. The Democrats have been responsible for a bunch of them. Franklin Roosevelt, basically interned hundreds of thousands of Americans just because they're of Japanese ancestry. The Democrats pushed slavery, and they tried a little experiment on us all during COVID. And I'm proud to have stood with you against their totalitarianistic tactics.
I'll tell you what was hilarious. Okay, and this is during the COVID era, of course. And so we couldn't find any doctor that would give us the ivermectin, the medicinal for humans. So I talked to one of my friends who is a farmer, by the way, chicken farmer, and has a degree actually in chickens, if that makes any sense whatsoever. And this guy is like really on top of it. And I said, look, I can't find the ivermectin. And he said, get what I get the one for horses. Right. And I said, I can get the one for horses. And he said, now remember, you're smaller than a horse, so you'll only take a small amount of it. And I took it and I announced it on the air, and you're not going to believe the jokes. So the next show, I actually neighed like a horse.
Yeah, it's funny. They try to call it horse medicine. Well, you know what? We give penicillin to horses. You give Advil to horses. I mean, a horse will eat anything. They'll eat carrots. That means carrots are just horse food. Is penicillin just horse medicine? But that's their way of trying to lampoon it, because they were trying. The government was paying huge bucks for these jabs, and still is, the best I can tell. They're still pushing the garbage. Yeah, at least in some quarters. Although I saw that Bobby Kennedy had taken it off of the childhood vaccine mandated schedule, and more power to him for that. But the mRNA jabs need to be pulled off the market. Robert Malone, who was one of the inventors of the mRNA technology from the very beginning, came out against using the technology in jabs to begin with. People just ignore that, and just the big money and power agenda is off the charts. And we got to pray that these monopolies get busted up.